Hello everyone, today in this video I'm going to be talking about my top 10 movies of 2022. Before we get into the top 10, I have just a few movies I want to cover. So the first one that I'd like to talk about is my worst movie of the year, and for 2022 this was Smile. Smile was very similar to It Follows, but kind of just a worse version, really. Like the entire movie is about the protagonist learning how to beat the villain like by following its rules. But then at the end of the movie, the rules just don't matter, and the villain, the monster, just wins, which really annoyed me. I found it was like a really frustrating ending. So that kind of just like soured my whole tone of like the entire film. So for 2022, my least favorite film was Smile. And I'd also just like to give a honorable mention to The Bad Guys, the DreamWorks animated film. This didn't make my top 10, and I didn't have particularly high expectations for it going in. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised by it. It had a very nice animation style. It had a good moral behind the story. And especially the thing that I enjoyed the most about it was probably the dialogue. They actually felt like a very ragtag group that actually knew each other well. Like they're not really speaking for the audience, but they're more speaking to themselves. And I was really enjoying it, especially with like a kids film as well. I felt like it was like well-written dialogue. So an honorable mention to The Bad Guys. Didn't make my top 10, but I definitely recommend watching it if you have not seen it already. With that out of the way, let's get onto our official top 10. So number 10 for 2022 is the horror film Nope by Jordan Peele. I heard some rumblings about this from friends watching it, saying that there were like some horrifying scenes in there. And it wasn't until I watched it myself that I properly understood how horrifying some of the stuff in this movie is. There are one scene in particular is probably like one of the most like horrifying and sickening scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And it's not even like particularly gory or violent or anything like that. It's just like the concept behind it is like so just gross and like terrifying. Like I was watching little bits of it while preparing for this video, and it's like I got physically ill again watching it, even after like a few years and having already seen it. I think I'm just gonna get into spoilers for this video. It was the scene where the alien eats all the people, and they're like stuck inside the alien, and they're just like screaming for help. That I don't know why, but like just that whole concept to me of like being eaten and you're stuck in there, and it's like it's only a matter of time before it just like kills you and digests you was like just so scary. It was really freaking terrifying seeing that shit. I still don't like watching that scene because it's just so visceral and like impactful. It was done really well. Unfortunately, the film like starts to transition into like a kind of like a western or like monster catching action film, which I didn't really enjoy as much. I probably would have preferred it if it stayed more like pure horror. So like towards the end it started to fall off for me, but that first like act or even like first half of the film, there is some just like horrifying stuff in there. Not for the faint of heart, I can tell you that much. Moving on to number 9, we have Hundreds of Beavers. This was one of the last films from 2022 I actually watched. I only saw this maybe a month or so ago, but I'm very glad that I did. This was such a funny film. I'm surprised that a film like this hasn't been made before. It's like a feature-length slapstick Looney Tunes style film. And so because it's feature length, it allows for these like heavily layered jokes and deep callbacks that aren't really possible in like a shorter episodic format, like a 10-minute, cartoon. So there's a lot of like just really hilarious gags that go on in this movie that like keep coming back and like building upon themselves, which is just really unique because I haven't particularly seen that much, to my knowledge anyway, of like any other film that I've seen before. It's also nice seeing like a full story arc and character development in like this slapstick style. He starts off as like a really shitty trapper, and by the end of the movie, like he's still very goofy and silly, but by God, is this guy freaking good at trapping beavers? So that was really nice to see, and I just felt it was like a very creative movie as well. So if you have not seen Hundreds of Beavers, I definitely recommend it. Very, very funny movie. Probably maybe one of the funniest movies of the year, actually. So definitely recommend it. For number 8 this year, we have Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. This one is a lot more talked about. This one had such a good moral behind the story, and it was woven so well into every character's personal story arc, which I really enjoyed. I felt like it was well thought out, the story, and like the plot points of how they go along. This had me in tears at points as well. Like I think especially particularly the ending, but it was just a very, very well done kids movie, and I'm really annoyed that I didn't watch this one in theaters, but I definitely should have, because I had people who recommended it to me at the time and I didn't get around to watching it. But now I absolutely regret that decision because I loved this movie. It was really, really good. The animation style as well, I hadn't mentioned yet, but that was really nice to see. Just something like a little bit different than what animation movies have done in the past. Like, I mean, if you compare this to the first Puss in Boots, it's a different animation style, which is nice to see them trying new things and mixing it up, which was good. Moving on to number 7, we have Sissy, the Australian horror film. This one started off way too on the nose for me, but it really starts to hone in on its message the further in you get. It reminded me of the 2002 horror movie May a lot, which that's a horror movie I really enjoy. Sissy can be considered like a product of her environment, where she does these bad things, yes, but it's because she's kind of molded by the people and like society around her. I will say the social media angle is probably the worst part of the movie. I don't even think she needed to be an influencer for the story to work, but that's probably what would appeal to mainstream audiences the most to get them to watch the movie. For me particularly, that's kind of like the low point. I feel like everything the film has to say doesn't need her to be an influencer for it to be said. But that was how I felt about it anyway. Very niche. Well, not niche, but like, it wasn't a big movie. I think it was only released on Shudder or something. So it kind of went under the radar a little bit. But I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't heard of it or seen it. Definitely worth watching. And I think everyone can kind of relate to Sissy's character to some extent. For number 6, we have The Batman. The Batman. I forgot that Paul Dano was the Riddler in this when I first watched it, so I was so pleasantly surprised when they do the face reveal. I think he's sitting in like the diner or something when they catch him. And I was just like, oh my God, that's Paul Dano. Oh my, I completely forgot. That was a really fun little surprise that I made up for myself for this movie. Bruce's relationship with Selena Kyle, Catwoman, was really nice. I kind of wish there was more of it, to be honest. Like, I was enjoying like the romance aspect of the movie. Unfortunately, the story was very similar to a Telltale game I've played. I believe it's the second season. It kind of has like a similar story, like where it's like centered around like Falcone and Bruce's father, like kind of being like a corrupt dude. So I indirectly had this movie partially spoiled for me. It's tough to not compare this to The Dark Knight, obviously. I think for me, the characters and the dialogue feel more human in this, which I preferred. But the themes of The Dark Knight were more interesting to me overall. I think they kind of have different strengths and weaknesses. Because Nolan, I don't feel like Nolan is really good at writing characters that you can connect with. He cares more about like the overall story or the themes and ideas that the characters represent. Whereas this movie, I feel like does a better job of making you care about these characters because you can relate to them more than you would in like um The Dark Knight. One thing I really didn't like though was them already setting up sequels and spin-offs in this. I can't stand that shit in movies. So I was like my eyes were I was just rolling my eyes when they had that ending monologue of the penguins looking out over the city, and it's like, it's going to be a struggle for power. People are going to want power, particularly the penguin in the new Penguin HBO Max TV series coming out. I was like, oh, shut up. Just let me enjoy this movie. Stop. I don't. I'll probably watch other things. You don't need to like spend screen time in this movie trying to get me to watch other stuff in this franchise. I really hate that stuff. So that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. But apart from that, this was obviously a really good movie. So I definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it. This is probably one of the most mainstream movies on this list. So you probably have seen The Batman. All right, down to our top 5. So for number 5, we have Matilda the Musical. Matilda is one of my favorite children's stories ever, probably. I really like the message that it gives kids to stand up to the grown-ups. I did have some criticisms about this. I didn't particularly like the introduction of Trunchbull. I felt that it could have been better to make her more intimidating. It's that I feel like that really should have been a big moment, like Trunchbull's introduction song. But it's not really as big of a moment as I would have liked it to be. She's not made to be like super scary or threatening or oppressive or anything really. It was kind of like a bit of an underwhelming song to introduce the Trunchbull to. My other criticism is that I think the second half of the film went by too fast. It needed more screen time for Trunchbull's relationship with Honey and Magnus to be better explained, because it feels like the Trunchbull is just randomly scared of Magnus's ghost at the end of the movie for no reason. When you compare it to the Danny DeVito one, there's like that entire sequence where they go to the Trunchbull's house and Honey is like talking to Matilda about like Trunchbull's relationship with Magnus and all that sort of stuff. And that's where Matilda like gets the idea, to create this ghost of Magnus to scare the Trunchbull. That scene just kind of isn't in the musical, which was a bummer, because then, as I mentioned, it just feels really weird that all of a sudden, like, the Trunchbull is terrified of Magnus's ghost when it's not sufficiently explained. Apart from that, everything else is pretty great. Like, the portrayal of the grown-ups is good. The songs are great. So many songs that I came back and like listened to many, many times. And Matilda's Defiance as well. Like, I think they picked a good kid actor to play Matilda. There's just a lot of really good moments. I was just like kind of nitpicking like my only gripes with the film, but apart from that, I was like, everything else I really, really loved about it. That's why it's my 5th favorite. So definitely recommend Matilda the Musical if you've seen the Danny DeVito one. It's a really good musical adaptation. Moving on to number 4, Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery or movie or story or something. Knives Out 2, Glass Onion. For me, this was easily better than the first one. I don't know if... I think a lot of people... Oh, no, I don't know. I think some people enjoyed the first one more, but for me, it was completely the opposite. It felt like everything connected perfectly in this movie, for me at least. It was just, like, really compelling from start to finish in a way that I don't feel like the first one particularly did as well, or I didn't really feel it with the first one. I suppose if I had to nitpick, I would say there were too many flashbacks for my liking. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen this now, but I remember when I watched it at the time, it just felt like kind of excessive, the amount of flashbacks that they had with this. But I like the idea of the story and like the whodunit, because it's kind of like all there. It's like, well, duh, but it's still done in a way that's interesting, which I like. So I've yet to rewatch this. I've actually only seen it once so far, but I'm looking forward to when I do, because especially with whodunits, like I feel there's a lot of rewatch value there. Is like, now that you know who it is and how they did it and everything, like seeing everything from start to finish kind of gives it a new light on the film. So looking forward to rewatching this one, but that is number 4, Glass Onion. Moving on to number 3, The Menu. This was a very enjoyable and satisfying script with a nice ramp up of tension throughout the film. I am so glad that this story was more interesting than just cannibalism. That was my like chief concern when I saw the trailer for this. And I was like, oh my god, if it's just gonna be like, oh, they eat people, I'm like, that's so boy, that's like the most like played out thing, So I was very glad that it was not that. Very cathartic movie, especially if you worked in hospitality. I think we can all relate to some feelings that the chef has. I think there was some plot convenience stuff that bothered me a little bit, like sending the guys out to be caught just to bring them back, and also Nicholas Holt's character making unrealistically bad food. That was a very funny scene in retrospect, yes, but like I still felt like it could have been funny with him just making like bad food. Because I remember, it's such a stupid nitpick, but the food that he made, from what I remember, was just like so like comically bad. It's like no one can make food that bad, They needed to make it like a little bit more realistic in terms that like he just makes shit food, That's like probably the most nitpickiest nitpick on this entire list. But that was one thing that I was like, why'd they do that? That's kind of annoying. But apart from that, I really enjoyed this movie. The cast is so good. Anya Taylor-Joy is great. Nicholas Hoult is great. Ralph Fiennes, he's great. I think there's another popular, Emma Thompson. I don't know if she's in this movie or not. I don't know. But yeah, really, really good movie. Tense, thrilling, interesting. You want to find out where it goes and what happens from start to finish. Just well executed all around for the entire duration of the movie, which is very good. 2 thumbs up. All right, number 2 is Barbarian. This one, I would say, is the most tension and fear a movie has made me feel from the entire year. Nope had that particular sequence or scene that made me like, I didn't even know if it was necessarily fear. It was more honestly perhaps just like grossed out and like physically ill and disgusted. But Barbarian, that entire sequence, when she finds the basement and the stairs that go down, and then she takes what's his name? The It guy. Bill Skarsgård. When she takes Bill Skarsgård down there, that whole thing was just like so freaking terrifying to me, and I was just like sweating in my seat for like 20 minutes straight for that entire duration, because it's like it just keeps getting like worse and worse and worse. I'm like, there's that room, and then she's like realizing what the room is, and then there's like a stairway that goes down past the room that's like so fucked up, and then he goes down there and then he just vanishes and and he's not responding and she has to go down there. I'm like, oh, that entire thing. The first time I saw that had me freaking out. I could not get over it. So that definitely probably has to take the cake for like the most like scared a film has made me feel for like the entire year for 2022. So well done, Barbarian, for doing that. Also, even that out of the way now, this movie also has one of possibly the hardest tonal pivots I've ever seen in a film. Not even just this year, but ever. And they absolutely got away with it as well. It completely works. I was, as I said, sweating in fear for 20 minutes only to be like laughing my ass off in like the next scene with Justin Long going into the horrible like room and then measuring up the size because it's like added value to his property. That was so funny. I can't believe they managed to do that. And like it worked as well. You know. I love the theme of trust that it leaves you to contemplate as well. I feel like it's explored pretty well in a way that doesn't especially like hit you over the head with it. If I had to nitpick, I would say upon rewatching it, I didn't care much for the 70s flashback. It didn't really add much, and it felt like it was kind of just there to have another hard pivot in the story as the tension is ramping up. That feels like that's the only thing it's in service of, because it doesn't really tell us anything that we especially needed to know about the guy. Really, like it's just his backstory, but like I don't need that explained to me. You know, it doesn't make the film scarier or like more tense or anything or more interesting. So that was it. That's like my one nitpick if I had to say something. But yeah, really, really good movie. Especially if you haven't seen it. Watching it for the first time, I wish I could go back and watch this for the first time, dude. That feeling I felt was like, oh, that's what I chase in horror movies. That exact thing is what I want when I see a horror movie. So, well done to Barbarian. Very good movie. And now for our number one movie of the year, we have, drumroll, Turning Red. There's a short drumroll. This movie was pretty much built for me. Very Inside Out-esque. That is like my soft spot for movies. Great coming of age story. Lovable characters. Fantastic music. The animation is fresh and stylish for a Pixar film. Again, similar to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. It's very nice to see them trying to do something a little different rather than just being generic animation that's like looked the same for the past 10 plus years. If I had to nitpick, I would say that I think I had two things. Yeah, she throws her friends under the bus, and I feel like they forgive her too easily. I think she should have done something to earn back their friendship, because it felt a little out of character for May to treat them so poorly. So that was one thing. And then the other was, I think Tyler needed more screen time. He's a bully for like the first half of the movie, and then as soon as they find out that he's a Four Town fan, they instantly just become friends with him. There's no like, there's zero transition between that. It's just like beep boop, like a switch is flicked. I feel like they should have just have like one or two scenes, where May is like, oh, maybe I misunderstood you or something, or I don't know. Do something to make it like a little bit more gradual. So I'm like, this guy's been like a jerk to you for the first half of the movie, and now like just because he likes Four Town, you're instantly friends with him and you just push all that aside. It was a little weird. But apart from that though, like I very little to say other than just like it was just a movie made for me. It like hits my emotional soft spot completely. Got me emotional at the end of the movie. I really liked it. Liked the animation, liked the characters, just everything about it. Just, it's a movie for me. So that's why it's my number one film for the year. So congratulations to Turning Red. 2 thumbs up. And that's it. That is my top 10 films for 2022. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and let me know in the comments what your favorite movies for 2022 were. If there was anything that didn't make this list, or if there's anything on my list that you disagreed with and you thought that sucked, please let me know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
Everywhere, free rolls in my milk, hey.